A strange silence hung over the scaffold that morning, the kind that feels alive like the air itself is watching. While most people picture Marie Antoinette walking to her death with calm pride, the real scene tells a darker story. Contemporary reports describe the sharp smell of old blood drying on the guillotine's wooden plank, a smell that clung to the throat like cold smoke. The wood was rough and splintered, and when her weakened body was pushed against it, the surface scraped her skin in small but painful ways. Her body trembled, not with royal dignity, but with exhaustion. Months of starvation, fear, and sleepless nights had turned her limbs into shaking branches. The shoes she wore were torn at the sides, and bruises marked her ankles where the shackles had rubbed her raw. The crowd saw a queen, but the truth was a woman slowly broken by a system built to crush her spirit before her body. Even her final moments were shaped for humiliation. Her hair was cut roughly, the rope around her wrists pulled too tight, and she was not allowed to adjust her clothes. Her last heartbeat belonged to a woman defeated by power, not fate. To understand how a queen became a public sacrifice, we must first examine the world that demanded her destruction. To understand the woman who reached that scaffold, we must return to the beginning, before the fear, before the chains, before the crowd demanded her silence. Marie Antoinette did not arrive in France as a symbol of greed or cruelty. She arrived in 1770 as a 14-year-old girl, a Habsburg archduchess, offered in marriage to keep peace between Austria and France. Popular stories paint her as a spoiled princess, but early accounts show someone confused, lonely, and unprepared for the brutal world of Versailles politics. The palace looked beautiful from a distance, but to her it was a maze of watching eyes and whispered judgments. Every mistake she made became a weapon for her enemies. Court factions fought over her, pamphlets mocked her, older nobles viewed her as an outsider. Even her struggle to produce an heir became public punishment, used to question her worth as a queen and as a woman. Outside Versailles, the country was breaking. France faced massive debt, rising bread prices, angry riots, and collapsing royal authority. Revolutionary writers needed someone to blame, and Marie Antoinette became the easiest target. Her Austrian birth made her a traitor in their eyes. Her strong personality made her dangerous. Her refusal to bow to political pressure turned her into a symbol of everything the revolution wanted to destroy. By 1789, she represented more than a queen. She represented the old world standing in the revolution's way, and for that, the leaders of the new era believed she could not be allowed to live. But the revolutionaries had already decided that Marie Antoinette represented a threat too powerful to leave alive. Once Marie Antoinette was marked as a threat, the revolution no longer saw her as a person. She became a target, and the state built a machine around her meant to erase her completely. The Committee of Public Safety, led by men like Robespierre and Saint-Just, believed their survival depended on destroying every symbol of the old world. A living queen, especially one tied to Austria, was too dangerous during a time of foreign armies, food riots, and fear of betrayal. So they prepared her downfall long before her trial began. The Revolutionary Tribunal, supposed to deliver justice, was redesigned to deliver guilt. Records show that the trial was rushed, evidence was thin, and witnesses were chosen not to reveal truth, but to support a political story. Even the charges were shaped to shock the public: treason, misuse of funds, and the most humiliating accusation of all, corrupting her own son. At the same time, propaganda spread through Paris like smoke. Cheap pamphlets showed her as a monster, a she-wolf, a danger to children, a foreign spy. These images did not reflect reality. They reflected fear crafted into a weapon. The goal was simple: make the people believe she deserved whatever came next. By the time she was moved to her final prison, the decision was already made. The law, the newspapers, the speeches, it all served the same purpose. Her body became a battlefield on which the revolution proved its power. The machinery of destruction was now in motion, but the psychological torture had only begun. By the time Marie Antoinette entered La Conciergerie, The real punishment had already begun. The cell she was given was not meant for living. It was meant for breaking. The stone walls stayed wet even in daylight, and the cold crept into her bones like a slow, patient creature. Her straw bedding smelled of mold, and guards watched her even as she tried to sleep, creating a constant feeling of being hunted. After her husband's execution, the cruelty sharpened. Her son was taken from her arms without warning, and every scream he made down the hallway became another wound she could not heal. Revolutionaries understood the power of grief, and they used it like a tool. Isolation, fear, and guilt were applied with the same purpose as chains. Then came the interrogation. In that crowded room, they accused her of incest, a charge designed not for truth but for humiliation. Witnesses noted how her face fell, not from fear of death, but from the shame forced upon her. Modern psychologists would call it moral injury, a pain that strikes deeper than physical harm. Her mind began to slow from lack of food and sleep, creating a numbness that looked like calm but was closer to collapse. By the time she faced the executioner, she had already survived a kind of slow-motion annihilation. The morning of her execution began not with dignity, but with one last act of control from the state. Before she was taken to the scaffold, guards cut her hair in uneven handfuls. They did not use care or skill. They hacked it away quickly, as if removing the last piece of her identity. The purpose was practical. Hair could interfere with the guillotine, but for her it was another wound to the spirit. Witnesses said she sat silent during the cutting, her eyes fixed on the floor, as though watching her old life fall strand by strand. Unlike Louis XVI, who received a closed carriage, Marie Antoinette was forced into an open dung cart used for common criminals. The wood was dirty and rough, and every bump in the road pushed her fragile body forward. Her hands were tied tightly behind her, so every jolt sent sharp pressure through her shoulders. The cart moved slowly through the streets of Paris, surrounded by a sea of faces. Some people jeered, some pointed, and some simply stared with cold curiosity. The air was filled with the thick smell of smoke, sweat, and wet dirt. Her physical state showed months of suffering. Writers at the time described her trembling legs, her pale skin, and the way she had to steady herself after standing. Her heart would have been racing, a natural response to extreme fear. Modern medical studies explain that moments before death, the body floods with adrenaline, causing fast breathing, shaking, and a strange ringing in the ears. It is likely she felt all of this as the cart reached the scaffold. When she climbed the wooden steps, she stepped on the executioner's foot by accident. Her instinctive apology, "Pardon me, sir," is often told as a sign of grace, but in truth it reveals the deep psychological collapse created by months of intimidation. Even at the end, she was conditioned to avoid conflict, to shrink herself, to survive one more second. What happened next happened quickly. The crowd fell into a tense silence as she was positioned on the plank. Historical records say the guillotine worked fast, but modern research suggests a final flash of awareness may last for a heartbeat or two, a brief moment where sound and light blur into one final overwhelming sensation. The immediate aftermath revealed what the spectacle was truly designed to accomplish. The moment Marie Antoinette's body was removed from the scaffold, the revolution moved quickly to erase everything human about her. There was no royal funeral, no quiet moment of respect, not even a wooden coffin. Her remains were placed in a simple cart and taken to the Madeleine Cemetery, a hidden burial ground used for mass graves. Witnesses reported that her body was lowered into a pit already filled with others, and workers scattered quicklime over the burial to speed decay. It was a final insult, an attempt to prevent anyone, even in the future, from honoring her. But the humiliation did not end there. Revolutionary leaders immediately released their own version of the story. Newspapers claimed the Austrian she-wolf was defeated. Pamphlets mocked her fear, her appearance, even her final words. They worked hard to create a legend where her death was necessary and just. Over time, these accounts shaped how later generations saw her, either a villain or a shallow fashion icon. Both versions erased the suffering she endured. The psychological impact on Paris was sharp. Some witnesses fainted, others stayed silent for days. Many sensed that something terrible had been unleashed. And soon, the very machine that destroyed her began turning on the men who built it. But history does not stay quiet. And Marie Antoinette's story would eventually, in the decades after her death, the story of Marie Antoinette slowly began to change. When the terror collapsed and France searched for stability, people started to look back at the violence with clearer eyes. In 1815, her remains were finally moved from the mass grave at Madeleine Cemetery and placed in the Basilica of Saint-Denis, the resting place of French royalty. The simple act of giving her a proper burial restored the dignity stripped from her at every stage of her downfall. Ironically, many of the revolutionaries who pushed for her death suffered the same fate. Robespierre, Hébert, Danton, almost every major voice who demanded her execution eventually faced the same guillotine. History returned their cruelty to them, creating a grim symmetry that scholars still note today. Modern psychology now understands her treatment as a clear case of state-engineered dehumanization, isolation, propaganda, humiliation, and public punishment designed to break a person before ending their life. These tactics, sadly, haven't vanished. Versions of them still appear in political smear campaigns, authoritarian regimes, and systems that punish before they listen. Her story reminds us that when a society uses shame as justice, truth becomes distorted and compassion becomes weakness. Remembering her suffering is not about defending monarchy. It is about understanding how easily power can turn a human being into a symbol to be destroyed. And that warning has never been more important.